Do you ever sit at your desk on a Tuesday afternoon, look at the work in front of you, and feel something heavy settle in your chest? Not stress exactly. Not burnout exactly. Something quieter and stranger than either of those. A kind of dull, low-grade dread that you cannot quite name. You're good at your job. That's the part that confuses you. You've been doing this for years. You know the systems. You know the people. You can do most of it on autopilot. By any reasonable external measure, you should be grateful. You have stability. You have a title? You have something to say at dinner parties when someone asks what you do. And yet, somewhere around year 3 or 4 or 7, something inside you started to dim. You catch yourself daydreaming during meetings about completely different careers. You read an article about marine biology and you wonder, what if I'd done that? You meet someone, you read an article about marine biology and you feel a little spark, and you wonder, what if I'd done that? You meet someone at a wedding who runs a bakery, and you think, maybe I should have done that. A friend mentions they're starting a podcast, and a voice inside you whispers, I could do that. And then, almost immediately, a second voice arrives, the harsher one, and says, stop it. You're being ridiculous. You're 34. You can't keep starting over. Pick a lane and stay in it like a normal person. You scroll LinkedIn and see people who have been at the same. Pick a lane and stay in it like a normal person. You scroll LinkedIn and see people who have been at the same company for 15 years, climbing the ladder one rung at a time, and you cannot understand them. How are they not bored? How are they not screaming inside? What is wrong with them? Or more likely, what is wrong with you? Maybe you've already done it once. Maybe you've already pivoted. Maybe you went from law to design, or from engineering to teaching, or from finance to something creative, and you felt, for about 18 months, like you'd finally found it. And then the same dimming started again, and the panic came with it, because if it's happening again, what does that say about you? You look at your resume and see what other people would call inconsistency. You see what feels like a confession. You think the phrase job hopper before anyone else has even said it. You ask yourself the question that haunts every person who has ever felt this way. What is wrong with me? Why can't I just commit to one thing? Why does every career, no matter how good it looked from the outside, start to feel like a small cage after a few years? I want to tell you something, and I want you to actually hear it. There is nothing wrong with you. The thing you've been calling a flaw is not a flaw. It is the signature of a specific kind of mind, and it has a name. You have the pattern weaver mind. A pattern weaver is someone whose intelligence is not built for the deep, single-domain well that the modern career system assumes everyone is built for. A pattern weaver's mind is a loom. Every career you've ever held, every role you've ever inhabited, every skill you've ever picked up has been another thread on that loom. The boredom you feel after 3 or 4 years in a role is not boredom in the way other people experience it. It is your loom telling you very clearly that the current thread is fully spun and it is time to add a new color to the weave. The world tells you the boredom means something is broken inside you. The world is wrong. The boredom is information. It is the most accurate signal your mind has ever given you about how it actually works. The rest of the world was sold a story about careers that goes like this. Find your passion at 22. Pour yourself into it for 40 years. Retire fulfilled. The metaphor was the well.
Pick a spot. Dig deep.
Get rewarded for the depth. A pattern weaver was never going to live well inside that story.
You are not a digger.
You are a weaver. Your mind does not derive meaning from depth in a single domain. It derives meaning from the integration of multiple domains. And what feels like restlessness to other people, what looks like inconsistency on a resume, is actually your mind doing exactly what it was built to do, which is to collect a new thread, weave it into the existing tapestry, and then signal you when it is time to find the next one. That signal has a particular feel. You know the one. It is the moment when a role you used to love starts to feel like wearing the wrong-sized shoes. When the things that used to challenge you have become rote. When you start hearing yourself give the same advice to younger colleagues for the third time, and you realize, with a small jolt, that you have nothing new to learn here. For most people, that moment is a crisis. For a pattern weaver, that moment is the loom asking for a new color. Let me tell you about somebody whose entire career was a series of those moments, and who built something extraordinary because she trusted them instead of fighting them. Her name is Daphne Koller. She started her career as a computer science professor at Stanford. She was extraordinarily good at it. She won a MacArthur Genius Grant in 2004. She had tenure at one of the best universities in the world by her early 30s. She could have stayed in that exact role for the rest of her life, and most people, looking at her position, would have considered her insane to leave it. She left it. In 2012, after almost 2 decades of being a pure academic, she co-founded Coursera, an online education platform that ended up reaching tens of millions of students worldwide. She wasn't an educator by training. She wasn't a tech executive. She was a pattern weaver who had spent 20 years thinking about machine learning and several years thinking about the broken state of higher education, and she put those two threads together and built a company. Then, in 2018, she did it again. She left Coursera to found Insitro, a drug discovery company that uses machine learning combined with biology to design new medicines. She wasn't a biologist either. She was, once more, a pattern weaver, weaving a new combination of threads, this time AI plus biology, plus the operational experience of running a global company. 3 completely different careers, one after another. Each one launched roughly at the moment the previous one had stopped teaching her anything new. Each one drawing on the threads from the previous ones in a way that nobody else in the world could have replicated. If Daphne Koller had been told at 22 that real professionals pick a lane and stay in it, and if she had believed it, she would have been a brilliant Stanford professor for 45 years. That would have been a fine life. It would not have been Coursera. It would not have been Insitro. The boredom she felt 2 decades in was not a failure of commitment. It was the most important signal of her career. This is what pattern weavers do when they finally stop apologizing for the way their minds work. They follow the boredom. They treat it as data. They listen to it the way a sailor listens to the wind. If you are still with me, and if any of this is starting to feel less like a description of someone else and more like a description of you, you should know you have found your tribe. Subscribe to the channel. We are a community of people who are learning, slowly and together, to stop treating our restlessness as a defect. And before we go further, I want to mention something for the people who are watching this and feeling, for the first time, like somebody is actually describing how their mind works. If that is you, I wrote a book for you. The book, titled The Pattern Weaver's Edge, expands on everything we discuss here in greater depth. It walks through why scattered interests are a cognitive strength, why the AI era is the first era in history that genuinely rewards this kind of mind, and it gives you the full toolkit, the idea ledger, skill weaving, curiosity sprints, and more, so you have something practical to work with on the days when the doubt comes back. If the videos have helped you feel seen, the book is what helps you actually live differently. The link is in the description. If you only ever buy one book from a YouTube channel, let it be the one written specifically for the way your mind already works. All right, back to the work. Now, I want to address something that comes up almost every time I talk about career boredom this way, because some of you watching are going to be wondering it. You might be asking yourself, wait, is this actually just burnout? Is this depression? Am I dressing up a mental health problem in flattering language? It is a fair question. It deserves a serious answer. Burnout has a specific signature. It is exhaustion plus cynicism plus a feeling of ineffectiveness. It usually comes from chronic stress, overwork, or working in conditions that violate your values. Burnout is most often not about the work itself. It is about the conditions around the work. The cure for burnout is rest, recovery, and changing the conditions, not necessarily the field. Depression has its own signature. It generalizes. If you are depressed, the dimness is not confined to your career. It bleeds into your relationships, your hobbies, your sense of pleasure in food, in music, in mornings. Depression makes the whole world flat, not just your work. And depression is a real condition that deserves professional support. And if anything I describe in this video is bleeding into the rest of your life that way, please talk to someone qualified. Pattern weaver boredom is different from both of those, and it has its own signature. It is specific to the domain. The rest of your life still has color. New topics still excite you. New people still energize you. New ideas still light you up. The dimness is limited to the role itself. And critically, when you imagine doing something else, a completely different something, you feel a flicker of aliveness, not an exhausted, I just need a vacation. A burnout person does not want a new career. They want a nap and a beach. A pattern weaver who has spun the current thread does not want a beach. They want a new loom. The other test is what happens when you actually try to rest. A burned-out person rests and starts to feel better. A pattern weaver who has hit the end of a thread can rest for months and still feel that same dim restlessness when they imagine going back to the same role. The rest didn't fix it because rest was never the issue. The issue was that the loom is ready for a new color, and no amount of vacation will put a new color on the loom.
Of course, you can be both.
You can be a pattern weaver who is also burned out, or who is also struggling with mental health. These are not mutually exclusive, but the move in either direction is the same. Take the signal seriously. Investigate it honestly. Get support if you need it. And if and when you've ruled out the other things, give yourself permission to consider that the boredom is the truth, and the truth is asking you to leave. Now here is the part of this conversation that I think your generation needs to hear most loudly. Even if you fully believe everything I've said up to this point, even if you accept that you are a pattern weaver and that the boredom is a signal, you might still be looking at the real-world implications and feeling terrified. You are looking at your bills.
You are looking at your responsibilities.
You are looking at the fact that the job market has allegedly never been more punishing for people with scattered resumes.
You are looking at AI eating entry-level positions, at hiring managers wanting specialists, at the entire system seemingly built to reward exactly the kind of person you are not. I want to tell you something that I think will eventually become obvious to everyone.
The world that punished pattern weavers is ending.
The world that needs them is beginning. And the transition is happening right now, faster than almost anyone has noticed.
Over the last century, employers prized deep, narrow specialists since focusing on a single well of knowledge proved the most efficient way to generate expertise.
That is no longer true.
AI now drills those wells better, faster, and cheaper than any human can.
The pure specialist, the person whose only edge was depth in one field, is increasingly competing against a tool that does not sleep and does not negotiate salary.
What AI cannot do, what it actually genuinely struggles with, is the kind of work pattern weavers have been quietly preparing for their entire lives.
AI cannot decide which two fields deserve to be combined.
AI cannot tell you that the thing your industry is calling a marketing problem is actually a behavioral psychology problem in disguise. AI cannot walk into a room where a hospital and a software company and a city government are all trying to solve the same hidden issue and translate between them. That work, the integration work, the weaving work, requires a human who has personally stood in multiple rooms.
That is you.
The person who got bored after 3 years and switched. The person whose resume looks like a constellation instead of a ladder. The person who has, by accident or by stubbornness, accumulated threads from 4 or 5 different worlds. The boredom that you have been ashamed of is not a career problem.
It is a career strategy.
It is the mechanism by which the world's most valuable workers over the next 20 years will accumulate the cross-domain experience that makes them irreplaceable. The person who has been the same role at the same company for 15 years is no longer the safe one. They are the one with a single deep well in a world that just got a machine that drills wells.
The person with 5 threads on the loom is the one with options.
You were not built for the old game. The old game is ending.
You were built for the next one.
And the next one starts now. So let's talk about how you actually act on this. Because by now, if you've been watching the Pattern Weaver videos, you know I'm not going to leave you with theory. There are 3 specific techniques I want to give you for using career boredom as a tool instead of suffering through it as a symptom.
The first technique is what I call the 3-year audit.
Pattern weavers tend to feel the first dim signal somewhere between year 2 and year 4 of any given role. Instead of fighting that signal or panicking about it, schedule it. Every 3 years, on a specific date you choose, sit down with a notebook and ask yourself 4 questions. Am I still learning here? Is the current role still adding new threads to my loom, or am I just maintaining old ones? If I imagine doing this for another 3 years, do I feel curious or do I feel claustrophobic? And what new thread is my mind reaching toward when I let it wander? You don't have to act on the audit. The audit is not a quitting trigger. The audit is a check-in. Sometimes the answer is, I still have room here. Sometimes the answer is, I need to start preparing for the next thread.
Either way, the audit replaces the slow accumulation of dread with a structured, scheduled, dignified examination of your own loom. The second technique is the bridge year. This is the most important technique in this entire video, so listen carefully. Pattern weavers tend to make career transitions the way they make everything else, suddenly, dramatically, with all the doors closed behind them. They quit the job, burn the bridges, and announce the pivot. Then, 6 months in, when the new role is also boring, they panic and conclude they are unfixable. The polymath move is different. The polymath move is the bridge year. Instead of treating each career change as a clean break, you treat it as an overlap. You stay in the current role in some capacity while you spend 12 months deliberately developing the next thread on the side. Side projects, evening classes, small paid experiments, conversations with people in the new field. By the time you actually make the move, you've already woven the new thread partway into your loom, and the transition is a deepening, not a leap. This is how Daphne Koller did it. She didn't quit Stanford on a Tuesday and start Coursera on a Wednesday. She wove the threads in parallel until the new thing was strong enough to stand on its own. The bridge year does two things at once. It protects your finances because you don't fall off a cliff. And it protects your weave because the new thread doesn't replace the old one, it joins it. Your value to any future employer is the combination, not just the latest thing. The third technique is what I call the intersection bet. Once you have 3 or 4 serious threads on your loom, stop framing your next career move as, what field should I go into next? Start framing it as, what role would only somebody with my exact combination of threads be qualified for? This question is uncomfortable because the role often doesn't exist yet. There is no LinkedIn job listing for person who combines law, behavioral economics. There is no LinkedIn job listing for person who combines law, behavioral economics, and game design. That is the point. The roles that perfectly fit a pattern weaver almost never exist as job listings. They get created by the pattern weavers themselves, either inside an existing organization that suddenly realizes it needs that exact combination, or as a small business or consultancy that gets built around the intersection. This is where pattern weavers go from being mid-level employees to becoming the only person their employer or their clients can find for a specific problem. Not because they are deeper than anyone else, but because they are at an intersection where the competition rounds down to 0. Now, let me bring this all the way back to where we started. To you, sitting at your desk on a Tuesday afternoon, feeling that dim, gray, low-grade dread in the middle of a perfectly good career. You have been told by almost every voice in your life that the dread is your fault. That it means you are not committed enough. That if you were a normal, well-adjusted person, you would be able to do the same thing for 40 years and be grateful for it. That story is wrong. It was wrong for your parents, and it is wrong for you. You are not failing at being a normal worker. You are succeeding at being a pattern weaver. The boredom you feel after a few years in any single role is not a moral failure or a mental health crisis. It is your loom doing its job, telling you that a thread is fully spun and a new color is asking to be added. That career switch you've been ashamed of, the one that makes your resume look messy, is actually the most strategic thing you have ever done. The next one will be 2. Each thread you add makes you rarer. Each combination you build makes you harder to replace. A 15-year single-track career would have turned you into a finely woven single-hued fabric. The career you are actually building, with all its turns and its strange transitions, is going to be a tapestry that nobody else in the world can produce. The pattern weaver who has had 3 careers by 40 is not behind the person who has had 1. They are ahead of them in the only race that is about to matter. So the next time you feel that dim signal, the boredom that has always frightened you, I want you to do something different. My loom is asking for a new color. What thread is it reaching for? That question is the entire game. If this resonated, if you finally feel a little less broken about the way your career has gone, subscribe to the channel. We are a community of pattern weavers learning in public how to use our minds the way they were built to be used. And if you want to go deeper than any single video can take you, the Pattern Weaver's Edge is in the description. And if you want to go deeper than any single video can take you, the Pattern Weaver's Edge is in the description, written for exactly the mind you have. And in the comments, I want to hear from you. What was the last role you outgrew, and what thread did your loom reach for next? Even if you didn't follow that signal at the time, look back honestly. The pattern is almost always there if you let yourself see it. Thank you for watching. Now go listen to the boredom. It has been trying to tell you something important for a long time.